All right, so today is the fixed orifice metering device, which fixed orifice. An orifice is another word for a hole. So if it's a fixed hole, fixed orifice, the size of the metering device is not going to change. Fixed hole metering device, right?
So that was not an expansion device.
Well, technically it is an expansion device because the refrigerant on the other side is allowing to expand. So it's still an expansion device, it's still a metering device, it's just that the size of the hole does not change. It's fixed. That one we passed around the other day, that little piece, there's two different types. There's a threaded fitting inside, and if the unit's new, you can unthread that fitting and you can take it out and you can see it. But if there's already refrigerant in it and you unscrew that fitting, refrigerant's going to come out like crazy. And so the liquid lines will be at boiling at 410A, be boiling at minus 50. So yeah, thing you don't want to do.
It's going to hurt.
Yes, it will be painful. Cool, but painful.
The only time your feelings matter.
Your feelings will be important for then. So this metering device is just going to be a hole. So think of a garden hose, and you held the back of your thumb on it, and only so much water can come out. It's going to build pressure up in this side, right? Yep. So think about that hole. The size of that hole is not changing. So let you think about what's happening. If my outdoor temperature, the ambient temperature, the temperature of the air coming into my condenser goes up, what's going to happen to the pressure out here?
Goes up.
Yes, it's going to go up. Now, if I have more pressure here, that means there's more pushing against that liquid. So if I have more pushing against the liquid, what's going to happen coming out of this metering device over here? There's going to be more liquid come out. And now if there's more liquid coming through this device, is that going to affect my pressure over here? Yes. So if I have a fixed orifice metering device, will my outdoor temperature affect my indoor pressures? Yes. Will that also affect how well my refrigerant's boiling? If I put more liquid in here, will that not affect my superheat as well?
Yes.
Yes. So my outdoor temperature can have an effect on what's happening in my superheat. Interesting, huh? So that's for sure. We've established that, right? Good. So now another thing we need to discuss is what about if my air temperature inside goes up? What will that do to my pressure here?
Goes up.
Goes up. If I have more heat coming across the refrigerant, is it going to change how fast I boil that refrigerant from a liquid to vapor?
Yes.
So will that also have an effect on my superheat?
Yes.
What about humidity? An air conditioner needs to cool and dehumidify. So if we need to dehumidify, is that going to take any capacity or BTUs to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
If I want to pull 1 pound of moisture out of the air from a vapor to a liquid, how many BTUs? 970 BTUs. So how do we size AC units?
By ton.
By tonnage. And how many BTUs are in a ton?
12,000.
12,000. So it's going to take BTU capacity to dehumidify. So if I'm dehumidifying, I'm taking it from a vapor down to a liquid, I'm having to pull moisture out of the air to do that, but it's going to take heat out of that moisture to make that happen. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm putting sensible heat from the water condensing into my refrigerant. So if it's a more humid day, there's more heat, and it's putting more latent heat of that change of state into my refrigerant, right?
Yep.
So is that going to affect my capacity of my unit?
Yes.
Yes. Is that going to also affect how much refrigerant's boiling?
Yes.
Yes. If you think about it, it's latent heat from the water vapor in the air turning into a liquid. It's rejecting latent heat, changing from a vapor to a liquid. The moisture in the air is going from a vapor state to a liquid state. That's rejecting heat into my refrigerant, and my refrigerant's absorbing that heat and boiling. So it's going from latent heat straight to latent heat. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So would that have an effect on how much refrigerant, my pressures, and even how much refrigerant I'm boiling to a vapor?
Yes.
All right, so what if the outdoor temperature goes down?
Then the pressure goes
Good. What happens if my indoor temperature goes down?
Goes down.
What if my indoor humidity goes down?
Goes down.
Now what if my outdoor temperature goes up, my indoor temperature goes down, my humidity goes up? Whoa, now it gets complicated, right? It's not so easy anymore. So all of these conditions are going to have an effect on my superheat with the fixed orifice. All these conditions will have effect. Come on in, join the party. So it's a very important concept. Before we had the air conditioner, how did we cool?
With ice box and fan.
Ice, yes, and a fan, that's correct. So who invented the ice machine?
Right there, John.
John Gorey, the father of refrigeration. But also, later came Willis Carrier, using a lot of John Gorey's thoughts and stuff. Willis Carrier invented air conditioning. He's the father of AC. So John Gorey is the father of refrigeration, but Willis Carrier is the father of air conditioning. Now, we cooled with ice, but the problem is what happens to that water when it's sitting around?
Becomes a hazard.
Well, it becomes a hazard, but also it will evaporate and change humidity. So when Willis Carrier invented the air conditioner, it was actually the apparatus to control temperature and humidity to not only cool the air, but also control humidity. You guys been to Florida? Some of you guys have been to a humid place at least?
San Antonio.
San Antonio, I used to live there. Yes, the humidity was always up and down, and when it was up, you knew it, for sure. So when the humidity goes up, it affects how you feel. But before that, the people's feelings weren't that important. What was more important was industry and textile. And I can't remember exactly what it was that they had asked them to cool, but it was, I think it was printing. I can't remember exactly, don't hold me to that. So when they were printing, they would have the paper, and humidity would affect the paper, and also the ink and everything else is happening. And when they wanted to do all this fancy printing, there was issues with how fast they could do it and how much they could get, and they needed to be able to not only control temperature, because they could do it with ice, they needed to control the humidity. So he invented the apparatus to control temperature and humidity, which is the air conditioner. So the evaporator coil that we have now, thanks to Willis Carrier, and he had to be really smart. With a name like Willis, he had to be smart, right? So he came up with the air conditioner to control temperature and humidity. Now we're going to talk about psychometrics and how he came up with that and some of the other stuff he saw and how he visioned all this later. But we need to know that the evaporator coil is not only trying to cool the air, but dehumidify the air. Now here in Vegas, you're probably thinking, not that big of a deal, but it still can be. You can't overlook humidity, and if you get to a place like Florida, and you try to cool the air, your humidity is actually going to go up. And if your humidity goes up in Florida, where the air is already full of moisture, you get condensation happening on all your walls. I've seen it so bad that happens. And if you get a lot of moisture on your walls, you end up with a lot of moles. And you can actually have houses that they have to tear down because of it. So humidity is not just a comfort issue, it's a safety issue. So thanks to Willis Carrier and the AC, he was able to then start marketing and making air conditioners for people. So first started out for factory and industry, textiles, and then it came into for people cooling. So the first air conditioner he came up with was it was like a window unit. I think in today's time it was like $150,000 or $200,000 for a window unit that was like 6,000 BTU, like a half a ton, like small, huge in size, but it was fairly small. And only the rich people had air conditioning. Then as things progressed and manufacturing progressed, they were able to make it cheaper and cheaper. But imagine living without air conditioning. Only the rich of the rich of the rich could afford that, right? So we actually, pretty good times that we could all afford to have air conditioning if you think about it. But it also paved the way for people to move out west. Imagine living in Vegas without air conditioning. So people did. They lived here. But now the air conditioning came along. That's why it's grown so big. So you can thank Willis Carrier for Vegas being big. Because I guarantee you it wouldn't be so big without air conditioning here.
That's a brand too, right? Carrier?
Yes, Carrier. So he started a Carrier air conditioning company, and it's quite a big brand. Yep. So I don't know all the details of it, and the facts, maybe grown. But you get the gist of it. If you want to, you can definitely, I always recommend checking in, check the facts, read up on it, learn more about it. So John Gorey, Willis Carrier, there are the two leaders for what we do. But the reason I take you that way is so that we understand that there's not just temperature affecting this pressure. There's also humidity. The humidity of the air will affect this suction pressure. And it's also affecting my BTU content. If I size a unit with so many BTUs, it takes BTU capacity to sensibly cool the air. The air comes in, the air leaves sensibly cooler, measurably cooler. But if I'm dehumidifying the air, that's latent cooling. Latent cooling, dehumidifying. So if we cool the air, it's sensibly cooler, and if I dehumidify the air, it's latent cooler. It's latent cooling, they call it. It's pulling moisture out of the air. That moisture runs down the evaporator coil into a drain pan, and we drain that water usually physically outside. Some codes require it to go into the sewer system. Some codes do not allow it to go into the sewer system. You got to check on where you are. So, but the humidity is a big part of what's happening in the air, and that's going to have an effect on our evaporator. It's going to have an effect on our suction pressure, but mainly it's going to have an effect on our superheat, how we're boiling that refrigerant through that evaporator coil. It's pretty important. So far, so good? All right, so I want to show you guys a little bit about how humidity and evaporation is going to be working. So I need to grab a towel. which I meant to grab earlier, and I got distracted. I also ADD, so I grab the beer right back. How's it going?
You know why they're doing that, man? So they can get rid of a lot of the rich people, and all that money come back. You know, man, you can't have that many rich people, man. Honey, you should go to space. That would
Well,
You ever hear any bunkers be like, oh man, I want to go to space?
I think I left my good one in the lab. Oh, we'll use this one.
A Costco pack.
That one's not working either. Hold on. Bear with me. Man, I want to make another order. I'm almost out of... Let's see if this one works here. Oh, beautiful. Found one that's still working. Yes. Oh, let's turn it to Fahrenheit. You can tell I didn't buy that one here. All right, so I have this rag. It's a wet rag. You can touch it if you want. Right? So it is a wet rag. So in the old days, we had thermometers, and they had actually had bulbs on them. Yeah, bulbs. So I got one here for you. Ah, looky here. Right? Used to call them Mercury bulbs. Nowadays, they don't use mercury. They use a type of alcohol. Don't drink it. Non-drinkable. But that's the bulb on there. So you can pass it around. So now we just have these digital ones with the metal rods, but I could do the same thing. I could wrap a wet rag around this bulb right here. Right? So we'll circle back to around that here in just a little bit.
Does that have some mercury in it, or
No, I got the ones that are mercury free, so you don't have to worry about poisoning yourself if it breaks. These have a type of alcohol in them that they use with coloring. So what I'm going to do though with this is I'm going to put this wet rag around here, around the bulb, if it was a bulb. Right? And then what I'm going to do is sling this around in the air. I got a little bit too wet. Bless you, my child. Bless you. So I got a little bit too wet. But the moral of the story is, what's going to be happening to this water on this rag as I am slinging it around in the air? A shoestring works really well because a shoestring will actually stay on the end. And this is really a horrible example, but it's going to prove my point sooner or later.
So, yeah,
All right, so what's happening to the water? Evaporating. So if the water's evaporating, that's the evaporation. Every time a substance changes state from a liquid to a vapor, it does what? Absorbs heat. So it's absorbing the heat away from the rag, away from the thermometer. What kind of effect is evaporation? Cooling effect. So what's going to be happening to the temperature of my thermometer? The temperature will be dropping, right? You agree that that's going to be happening? Yeah. You think it's going to happen on this? Yeah. Really? Can anybody look and see what the room temperature of this room is at the thermostat? 75 degrees. Is that Fahrenheit?
yes. I hope so.
It would be very uncomfortable. So what does the temperature of this thermometer say?
62.4.
Whoa! I cooled the thermometer off.
You're cool.
Now I am. How did that happen? Evaporation, right? Just like how your body sweats. If the old canteens had the canvas, you could put water on it and you could sling it around. And some of the guys that served in Iraq, they would take a sock, put their water bottles in sock, they would dip it in the water and they would sling it around because as the water is changing state from a liquid to vapor, it's absorbing heat. As it absorbs heat, it drops the temperature of this thermometer, right? So let's think about this though. Would this drop the temperature the same if I was in Florida?
no.
What's different about Florida? It's humid, so the air already has a lot of moisture in it, right? So if the air already has a lot of moisture in it, is that going to speed up or slow down my evaporation? It's going to slow it down. So I have less evaporation. So if I have less evaporation, that means there's less changing state, which means it's going to drop the temperature less. So that's pretty cool, huh? So what about here in Las Vegas? What do we have different about the air here? It's very dry. So what's that going to do to my evaporation?
We're going to make it a lot easier.
It's going to make it a lot easier. It's going to speed it up. Right? So could I get a lower temperature with this here or in Florida, assuming the air temperature is the same? Here. You get a lower temperature here. So what's really cool about that is regular thermometer, regular temperature, sensible heat. Humidity is latent heat. I can't measure how much humidity is in the air with the thermometer. So humidity, that's where the dehumidifying comes. It's latent cooling. Humidity is latent heat. The moisture's in the air, it's hidden. But there's still heat there. Yes?
So how does an RH meter work?
An RH meter is just reading just humidity, just how much percent of humidity the air is holding. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's just measuring the percent of the humidity in the air, which isn't a precise number. There's a lot to that. It's a loaded question. We'll circle around to that in another day. But what's really cool about this, let's say in Florida, is there more latent heat in the air?
Yes.
Yeah, there's more humidity. In here, there's less latent heat in the air
Yes.
because there's less humidity, right? So if I did this, and maybe I didn't want to sling this around, what if I just took this and put it in front of the fan so that maybe where the filter's at, so the air is coming across? Would that cause this number to drop?
Yes.
That's a number that we actually use. It's called a wet bulb temperature. A wet bulb temperature. It's a wet bulb temperature. I put a wet rag on a thermometer bulb and it gives me wet bulb temperature. Wet bulb temperature. Guess what this thermometer is reading since it has a dry bulb?
Dry.
This is a wet bulb. What do you think this one is? Dry bulb. So anytime you see regular temperature, it's going to be dry bulb. That thermostat's actually reading dry bulb temperature. If I put a wet wick on that thermostat and slung it around, it'd probably break. But it would be wet bulb, hopefully for a little bit anyways. So this is wet bulb. It's reading wet bulb temperature. If I know the wet bulb temperature and the dry bulb temperature, we can find the percent relative humidity that he was asking about. There's a chart, there's a graph for it. But for right now, wet bulb temperature. Now, if the air was full of moisture, is my temperature going to drop as much? No. If my air is dry, is the temperature going to drop more? Yes. So here's what's really cool about this wet bulb temperature. I can get just this one number, and it's representing the temperature of the air sensible and the temperature of the air latent. Because the evaporator cool doesn't care if it's sensible or latent, it's just absorbing that heat. So this one number, wet bulb temperature, gives us both as far as the evaporator coil is concerned. So this evaporator coil, we're going to get to this temperature, and a temperature of the air coming into the unit, which we call return air, is called wet bulb, and we abbreviate WB, wet bulb, and we put RA for return air, and then degrees Fahrenheit for temperature. So if I have a fixed orifice metering device, will the outdoor pressure affect my indoor?
Yes.
Will the indoor temperature affect the indoor?
Yes.
Will the humidity inside affect the indoor?
Yes.
All these factors will affect the indoor, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to need to also get the outdoor temperature. We're going to need to record the outdoor ambient temperature of the unit. Ambient just means around you. Your ambient air, the temperature of the air around you. But we're looking at the ambient of the condensing unit outside. So it's the temperature of the air near the condensing unit. So that air is what's going to be coming into the condensing coil. Not just, hey, Google, what's the temperature of the air outside? No. I want to know the temperature of the air coming into this condensing coil. Because let's say this is on the roof, and there's a lot of heat on the roof. I want to know how much heat is coming into this condensing coil, because that is what's going to affect my pressures over here. Right? Good. So we also take into account return air wet bulb temperature. And then we put these numbers into a formula. And if we put these numbers into a formula, we can find out what our superheat should be under those conditions. So our formula is IDWB. What do you think ID stands for?
Indoor.
Indoor. What do you think WB stands for? Wet bulb. Indoor wet bulb. All right? Indoor wet bulb. And then it is indoor wet bulb times 3. So we get that number and then we multiply it by 3. And we do that first. Can we find the wet bulb temperature of the air coming into the evaporator? Yes, we get a thermometer, put a wet wick on it or a shoestring. Boom, gives us wet bulb temperature. So I get that number, multiply it by 3. And then I minus the ODT. What do you think ODT stands for? outdoor ambient temperature. So we put that number, whatever it is, minus that. Sound good? Right? You guys love formulas? And then minus 80. And then minus 80, right? And then once we get all of that done, then we have our big parentheses here. We do that, and then we divide that answer by 2.
Wait.
Yeah, right? And then that gives us our target superheat. Remember, our targets is where we want to be at? If my target is my computer over there, and I'm throwing the marker, and I'm hitting down here, I'm hitting below my target. So that would be low superheat. And if my target is that, and I'm hitting it above, that would be a high superheat. And if I'm hitting exactly, oh, come on, exactly on my target, I'm hitting my target that's good, right? The difference is that target superheat is going to change with conditions. The beautiful thing is, though, once I find that target and set it, if I change to come back another day when the conditions change, the formula is going to keep our targets to what it's doing. Think about it this way. This fixed orifice metering device is like taking your gas pedal and sticking a rod on it and having it at a certain amount of gas. And you're flying down the highway, and they can calculate that and find out how fast you should be going. Let's say on a straight road with no wind, 2 people in the car, let's say 60 miles an hour. But then what happens when that car starts going up a hill? Slows down, right? They can calculate, okay, that's an 8% grade with 2 people in the car, no wind. They can calculate it and say, okay, the car should be going 55, or let's say 50, and it's good. But now we put 4 more people in the car, so they redo their calculation. Okay, the car should be going at 40, and it's still good. And on the other side of the hill, maybe the car is going 70 or 80 down the hill. They calculate the grade to say, okay, the car under those conditions should be going this fast. But how fast the car should be going is going to change every time the conditions change. You have a tailwind, or a headwind, or more people in the car, or less people in the car. See how all these conditions will affect the speed of that car? So on this fixed orifice metering device, the indoor humidity, the indoor temperature, the outdoor temperature, all that's going to have an effect on my superheat. So my superheat is going to be changing when the conditions change. So with a fixed orifice metering device, we need to know our conditions, put it into the formula, and it's going to give us what our target superheat should be at that point. That's what it should be at. How do I find out what we're at? How do I find out what my superheat should be at? I know, here's what it should be at. How do I find out what I'm actually at?
Actual suction line minus suction saturation.
Yes! That's exactly right. The actual suction line temperature minus the suction saturated, that's where I'm at. So I look, okay, here's where I should be, target superheat. Here's where I'm at. Let's see if those numbers match. So, see how the fixed orifice metering device is so much simpler? Oh, wait a minute. It is simpler, but it's more work for us, right? Now we got to get the outdoor ambient temperature, and I got to run inside, get my wet wick, put it on here, get the return air wet bulb, and then run over and put it in my formula, and hope that you're not dyslexic like me, because if you're dyslexic like me, you're going to screw those numbers up, and then get your answer, and then boom, you're good to go, right? This is exactly what we do. Except improvements. That wet bulb, if you do it correctly with the actual, distilled water and a shoestring, and you'll get the same temperature. But I prefer this. This is a nice little digital thermometer. I press the on button. I wait for a little bit. It gives me the percent relative humidity of the air. Ooh, we have high humidity today, 42%. The temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Anywhere else in the country, 44 is considered low humidity, by the way. All right, so our humidity is 44, our temperature is 75, and if I press this button, it gives me wet bulb temperature. Our wet bulb temperature is 61.
Cool.
How awesome is that?
How much does that cost?
These are about, $60, $65 for this particular one.
You need to put on a tool sheet.
Can you give us
I have one.
the name of the tool?
Sure, I have a wish list tool list. I can email you guys. Which changes constantly. There's always new stuff. So this is what I use. It's going to give me the temperature, but there's other tools that do it too. This one does a bunch of other stuff we'll get into later, but it also does, if I turn it on, beep, I turn it on, and then I press mode. Hello, respond.
Mode.
There we go. All right. Now it's on Fahrenheit. Okay. No, it's in Celsius. How do I get you to Fahrenheit?
Yeah, the temperature on my motorcycle is in Celsius.
Well, I'll have to read the instructions, put it back on Fahrenheit.
Is it Japanese?
Oh man, it's like
But anyways, this will also tell me wet bulb.
yeah, bro.
But we'll use this one for the first time. We're going to get the return air wet bulb temperature and the outdoor ambient temperature with our formula. We're going to find out what our superheat should be. I've turned all the units onto a fixed orifice metering device. So you guys excited about that formula?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay. So if you like the formulas, then I'll just throw this chart away.
No.
Oh, you like the chart, huh? Oh, okay. Then I'll give you the chart. So I'll pass this around. Take one and pass it down. By me passing it around, you guys pass it around. So what I've done is I've taken this formula and I made this chart. And me being dyslexic, it took me a long time to make this. And there's probably still some problems on it, but it's pretty close. There's other charts out there that are smaller, but they skip in increments of 5. So they'll skip in increments of 5 here, and they'll skip in increments of 5 there. So you're trying to figure out, well, where am I at? So I remade the chart with every single number. And now normally when I print this, it fills up the whole screen. But my computer printing on our printers here, it had a problem. But I'm not printing this because I expect you to keep it. I'm going to email this to you so you have it on your phone. You can save it in your tablet, and you can pull it up and find it and zoom in on it. Because notice how these are fairly small numbers.
Yeah.
What's beautiful about this is we can get the information we need right here in this chart. So let's first start with the top. Oh, did everybody get one? Has it made it the way around yet? We'll start with the top. At the top it says the target superheat chart. Target means where I want to be, right?
Yes.
Target. And then it says for a fixed orifice metering device only. And just in case you don't know what that means, it also says not a TXV. So I need to update it. And also I guess I should now put not TEV because half the people to TXV, half the people to TEV. So I need to update it. And then it has the formula. And then down below it says RA. RA stands for return air. And if you know what that means, it means the air entering the evaporator, the unit sucking the air in. Wet bulb temperature, indoor wet bulb, evaporator wet bulb temperature. So the temperature is going down as wet bulb. The wet bulb in this room is 61 degrees. So find 61 degrees. 61.
At the top, right?
Yep. Find 61?
Yep.
That number runs down. That's one column we're looking for. 61. But we need another number to find out what it should be at, right?
Yep.
So let's get the outdoor temperature. So now I'm going to go outside. I'm going to get the outdoor temperature. And the outdoor temperature in our example here is 75. So we're going to then find 75 on this side. This side says the temperature of the air entering the condenser. ODT. Outdoor ambient temperature. So we're going to find 75.
14.
And we're going to find those two numbers cross. What'd you find?
14.
14. So under the conditions right now, our superheat should be at what? 14. How cool is that? So let's make up another example. Let's say that the return air wet bulb was 53. And let's say the outdoor ambient was 67. 6. Our target superheat 6. Notice how the conditions changed. What our target superheat should be at changed as well. You notice that? Same exact unit. Let's do new conditions. Same exact. Notice what's the lowest number you see? 5. Low as you can go. Now, if we look over here, what if my unit was at a wet bulb of 52 and my outdoor temperature was 75?
You better turn that off.
You better turn it off because our target superheat is going to be below 5. What's happening to the compressor?
It's gonna be
Flooding it with liquids. Bad thing. So that's outside design conditions. We shouldn't be operating that unit there. A TXV would be able to handle it. But that fixed orifice, under those conditions, it would be flooding. Okay, so same exact unit. Let's go to another condition where the wet bulb was 76. The Florida condition, 76 there. And the outdoor temperature was 67.
40.5.
40.5. Wow, look at that. My superheat is possible, unlikely but possible, to be good as low as 5 and still be good as high as 40. Right? So you're going to hear at some point in time people that are going to say, oh, just make sure your superheat's 18, you'll be fine. Under what day and what condition and what kind of metering device? It's not a set number. It's going to be moving. So now can you see how I love TXV so much?
Yeah.
A TXV is cruise control. You're going up a hill, it's going to give it more gas. You're going to stay at your same speed. You're going down the hill, it's going to cut back on the fuel, less, right? So a TXV says, I'm going to keep that the saturated right about here, keep the superheat there. We're going to be running in optimal conditions, assuming you get enough refrigerant, assuming you're not out of craziness with your conditions, and it's going to try to maintain. So it makes our job easier. But with a fixed orifice, people are like, oh, I love those fixed orifices. They never fail. Yeah, it's just a hole. But then it's a lot more work for us. And look how much more dangerous it is for the unit. On the day that we had a 40-degree superheat, that means my saturation is really taking place right about here. That means all this is sensible heat. If I'm boiling all my refrigerant away right there, you think it's going to be doing a really great job at cooling? No, the efficiency is not going to be very well at all. And the day that I have a 5-degree superheat and I've filled my evaporator coil with saturation, I'm getting pretty dangerous for my compressor. But that TXV is going to try to maintain that superheat right there, and it's going to do a much better job of that. That TXV is awesome, right? Take care of it, treat it good. It's going to take care of you.
Customer, you automatically put that one in.
I do, yeah. But whoever you work for may be like, I don't like TXVs, and you bite your tongue. You don't tell them, well, you know, my instructor Ty said, you do whatever your employer says, but know the difference. And then when you get on your own, you know the difference, and then you know how to do it. Because your next employer may be like, I hate those, and I love TXVs. Like, oh yeah, my instructor, he said that was a good thing too. And he's like, oh yeah, see. So know when to talk and know when to not. So. I don't want everyone to hear somebody coming out of school, well, my instructor said you were wrong. And then they come back to me all mad. And I'm like, well, you know, sometimes it's a misunderstanding. And sometimes like, well, you know, you are wrong, but it's really awkward me having to have this conversation with you. But no, just keep it to yourself. So that fixed orifice metering device, all these conditions are affecting it all the time. So we have to get more numbers. And we now have to use this chart. So you have to carry that chart with you. Now, I loved carrying the chart. On my clipboard that I had these old metal, in my day, we had these big metal clipboards. And I would have this chart taped on the back of it. So I would use the chart, and it was much better for me because I didn't have to use the formula on it. Because I remember when I first started and the guy was telling me about superheat, he's like, oh, just make sure superheat's 18 and you're good. But I go back to that same unit and I charged it. The same unit and I charged. And I go back and the conditions changed. I wouldn't be at 18 anymore. And I knew that nobody else worked on it, and I would readjust it right back on 18. And then I put in candle wax. I would put candle wax on the valve caps so I could see if anybody worked with it. Somebody had to be messing with it. So I'd do it just right on 18. And then I'd come back, and it would be all over the place again. It'd be completely different. And I'd look, and the wax is still there. Nobody else is going to melt wax on a unit. I know it, and it would be changing. I'm like, well, why is it changing all the time? And then when I started taking classes, they're like, wow, superheat is going to be moving under a fixed orifice with conditions. I'm like, oh, that guy lied to me. It's not that he lied to me. He that's the way he was taught. It made sense to him, and that's what he did. So you guys need to know that conditions are going to affect with that fixed orifice. All right? So, but wait. There's more. Before we go to the lab and do this, what we're going to do is, and we want to look at our subcooling as well, and I have another paper I want to give you shortly. But before we do that, there's an app we're going to add to our tablet. The app we're going to add is called a super cool app. Oh, my phone's recording, so I can't show you mine. But if you type in super space cool, a picture of me should show up. And then under that, there should be the letters SC. S and then C in blue and red. And so it's free. So go to your Play Store and download the Super Cool app. Yes, SC. Super Cool. Super Cool app. Yep, that's the one. Install that one. So since nowadays we have these apps, we're going to use them to benefit us. It'll take a little bit to download.
No space. No space would be super cool.
Mike just made me try to put my credit card on here. You need a card.
Email that to me with your date of birth and social security number, and I'll take care of it for you.
No, that's the worst, man.
Yep, that's the one. So while that's downloading, oh, we already got it on. So while it's downloading, we'll let everybody get it downloaded. On the other side of this target superheat chart, it's got all your notes you're going to need for superheat. Make sure the airflow is good. Make sure it's never below 5. Talks about the flooded evaporator, a dry evaporator, fixed orifice metering devices, TXV, TEVs. It's got all your notes for superheat in one nice little piece of paper. So when you're in the field, you're like, oh man, I can't remember everything about that. Oh, boom. And I'm going to email this to you guys as well, or send it to you digitally. You'll have all this information so you can find it.
You good with two?
Yep. So you know how to tell if I did it because there'll be spelling errors on it. And if the guy in the morning class like, hey, there's several words misspelled. I'm like, well, that's proof that I did it. So for sure.
The best part about the fact that you install all that work, I don't have to worry about it. Like, I'm putting it somewhere, like, oh, he's gonna mark me because I put it over.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Be good at air conditioning. I don't care about spelling. Oh, the sign-in sheet. I forgot to put the sign-in sheet. Let's pass that around. Make sure everybody initials. All right, everybody got it loaded up?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start first with charge a unit. So press charge a unit. I tried charging a unit, but the unit never paid. I had to charge the customer.
And then we're doing this one.
We're going to do non-TXV. Non-TXV. Notice it has a picture of a TXV with a circle and an X through it. Non-TXV. So now when we press non-TXV, it brings up and asks us some questions. First of all, what kind of refrigerant you're working with? We're going to be working with the rose-colored refrigerants. 410A. So you're going to click that one, choose that one. And that has a picture of a sun. And it says below it's looking for the outdoor temperature. What was our outdoor temperature? Let's just pick another. Let's pick 80. Let's pick 80 as the outdoor temperature. And the return air wet bulb, let's choose, let's throw in there 70. Return air wet bulb.
What was outdoor?
70, outdoor temperature 80. And 410A refrigerant. And then you're going to hit the next button. Boom! Target superheat. They have an app for that now. So as badass this was back in the day, they have an app for that now. You don't have to carry this paper around with you. No, not in front of me. There's so many hours trying to do that. So, man. But wait, that's not all. There's more.
There's more.
And over here, you enter your suction pressure. So let's enter the suction pressure of, let's say, 120.
Perfect.
All right, and let's do our actual suction line temperature of 50. Vapor line.
PSIG is 120, and then the vapor line.
Vapor line, 50.
Yeah.
So put that one on 50.
So then you're telling
the
us what we need to
temperature
do.
is 50.
Bam.
We don't. What you're doing is you're grooming us to use these so that when we're out of school, we don't have to call you.
Exactly right. Ideally, you'll call me for stuff that we didn't talk about. So the stuff that we did talk about, you'll... and see, the thing is, there was these little cheat sheets, like the little notes and stuff that came out, these little cards that came out, and a lot of the old school people I worked with was like, you just need to know the formulas of how to find that. I'm like, okay. And then I'm like using those little cards because they were helping me. And then over time they had little books and stuff to help you, and now they got these little slide rule things. But nowadays, as technology progresses, you have apps for this. And now none of these apps are perfect. You guys need to understand what's happening with the system. But if you can use this is a tool to make you more successful. It helps prevent human error, and it speeds up the process, make it go faster. So if you're doing this, it tells you right there what was our problem.
Too much refrigerant.
Too much refrigerant, which means we're overcharged.
And that the indoor fan is running.
How awesome is that? Right? So these are a tool. So at first I was against apps and all that, but look, this right here it's a tool. So instead of me fighting it, we're going to embrace it. And you guys are going to be doing that. So we're going to go to the lab here in just a little bit, and you guys are going to be doing superheat and subcooling. Or actually superheat mainly. But there is some limitations of this particular app. Notice it only talks about superheat. It only talks about superheat. My concern with that is superheat's very important with the fixed orifice metering device, but I can't just forget about what's happening outside. I need to still take a look at subcooling, and I have another paper for you. Yay! So I'm going to pass this around. It's a subcooling paper. It's got all your notes about subcooling. So you don't remember what's what? It's all your notes right there in one. I need to put this. If you guys know somebody that's really good at making apps, I don't have any good ideas, send them to me. We'll get together and become millionaires. I will make all of my handouts into apps, and we can make it precise. But regardless, here I have this is just a guide. At the very, very bottom, it says outdoor ambient temperature, approximate target subcooling for a fixed orifice only. Fixed orifice target subcooling general guide. Remember to charge a fixed orifice meter device by superheat. But it gives you an idea of what's happening to your subcooling. You don't charge off of this, but it tells you what's generally happening. What it means is as your outdoor temperature goes up, you'll have less subcooling with the fixed orifice metering device. As your outdoor temperature drops, you have less pressure pushing the liquid out of the condenser, so a lot of times you'll store more subcooling in the condenser. Just a guide. So what I want you to know is, even though we're charging a fixed orifice metering device with superheats, take a look at subcooling. The app doesn't do it, but we should still look at subcooling. If I have a 20 degree subcooling, my superheat's good, but I'm at 20 degrees of subcooling, hey, something's not right. We need to be investigating that. We need to be looking to see what's going on. Maybe I got a clogged up filter dryer. Maybe it's a mismatched system. Something's not right. There's something we need to look at. And if you go on this app and choose the one that says TXV, well, what do we focus on more with the TXV? Subcooling. But the problem with the app is it focuses all on subcooling, and it doesn't look at superheat at all. And yesterday with my example, we got to see how that could be a problem. I'm giving it enough refrigerant, but I need to check to make sure that TXV is doing his job. And so we still need to check it. So the down part of this app, as much as I like it, it doesn't tell us the other side of the story. So even though it's TXV, we focus on subcooling, I still got to check superheat. With a fixed orifice, I focus on superheat, but I still need to see what's going on in my subcooling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So all these notes on here, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to the lab. I'm going to bring my my digital psychrometer, and we're going to go to the lab, and we're going to turn those units on. I got them already set for fixed orifice. We're going to use the app or the paper, whichever you prefer, and we're going to check the charge. Check the charge of the units. All right?
I'll take the app.
Yep.